Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? Facebook, YouTube, hope you are doing well. So this morning, I want to talk about something that we were discussing last night in our trading room, which is trading perspective. Now, what I'm not going to be talking about this morning is timeframes for technical analysis, perspective of a trade. What do you do when you look at the weekly time frame, the monthly time frame? I'm not looking at all of the perspectives relative to a trade. I'm talking about the concept of perspective and how it affects you as a trader and what things you can do to help maintain the right perspective. And the reason why I'm doing this is because we were covering this last night with our swing traders in our trading room last night, and we did this for about an hour, but there were too many good insights, and the guy said it was a really valuable session, so I wanted to share a couple of those things with you today. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to split up the screen so that you can see what's going on, because I want to be able to show you a few diagrams so that you can see exactly what we're doing with that. So just bear with me while I get the screen in play. So just going to share that. So yeah, this was something that we had, and I've talked about before, and I think I've actually talked about this on a Facebook Live, but I wanted to show you this very much in terms of how you can use this. And it's something that we do in our trading room without realizing, because the three things that help maintain your perspective as a trader are very much related around what you can do yourself, but also what you can do with results to having other people involved in the process. So if we think about it like this, okay, so most people know, or most traders know, that they've got to have a long-term perspective on what they do. So the challenge with that concept and saying to a trader, well, you've got to have a long-term perspective regardless of what you trade, is they acknowledge it intellectually. So they know that they've got to have a long-term perspective, but the challenge is, for a large percentage of them, their behavior is very different to what they know. So intellectually they know that, but behaviorally they're doing something very different. So as somebody who's coaching traders for 18, 19 hours a week, that's what I'm doing. Kerry's the same, Martin's the same. So whether it's day trading and those guys in the day trading room for TSC, or me in the swing trading room, we've had these discussions on numerous occasions about what things can you do to help a trader maintain a longer term view rather than a short, narrow focus. And the main challenge with this is that a trader does need narrow, blinkered focus at the point that they're placing trades, managing their trades. They need discipline. They've got to stick to the rules. They've got to shut out the noise of other trades. But the key thing is, how do you do that? Well, we teach you how to do that. We teach you specific mental processes to do that. But then how do you then maintain a long-term perspective? And a lot of it comes down to what specific trades or what specific results you're going through at the time. So way too many traders either cut their trading career short, or give up on a strategy, or jump from too many different strategies, options, courses, because of the fact that they know intellectually they should have a longer term perspective, but they're actually behaving with a short term perspective. So you hear phrases like, well, I hear phrases like, the strategy doesn't work. And I say, okay, so what do you actually mean? Well, I had 4 losers. And I say, okay, so what's the data tell you over the last 5 years about that strategy? And that's usually when the trader goes quiet and says, I don't really know. Either they don't know because they haven't looked at the data, or they don't have access to it. So very often, when a trader makes a specific statement, or a kind of global statement, the strategy doesn't work, or technical analysis doesn't work, they're either coming at it from one angle, the angle that they've tried, or they're coming at it from a short-term perspective. So let's think about it. You know logically that you should have a long-term perspective. And one of the things I was doing last night, I'm just going to pull the screen up so it's a little bit bigger. So one of the things that I was talking about last night is this idea of, as a trader, you want to imagine yourself sitting on a cliff, or sitting on, or looking out to sea, and you're looking out at horizon. So when you're out on a cliff looking out to sea, the horizon becomes bigger. It becomes clearer and it becomes bigger. So you can see a further distance from point A, and we'll call point A the starting point of when you learn to trade, and point B being the end of that trading period. Now, when I speak to most traders, regardless of whether they're position traders, day traders, or swing traders, most of them will say that they're not in it for 5 minutes. They're not in it for a year, not even in it for 5 years. Most of them want to be in it for a long period of time. So this is where this battle between short-term perspective versus long-term perspective, acting rationally based on the process over a long period of time versus acting irrationally based on the result of the last couple of trades. So as a trader, you're sat on the shoreline or you're sat on the cliff, and each trade relative to the total number of trades that you're going to place over a 10-year period, a 15-year period, a 20-year period. If you think one trade is a tiny dot on the horizon. So from a perspective point of view, the energy and the emotion that you put behind a trade or the result of the last couple of trades really in the long term doesn't mean a lot. But the challenge is, as I've already said, that when you are there and that trade is right in front of you on your screen, and that trade you've got to manage, and you've got the result of the last 2 trades, winners or losers, you've got the result of the last 5 trades, you've got a friend who's making money and somebody else is, and you're not making money, or you're making money and they're not. That's when the emotional element comes in. So how do you do this? Well, the concept that I like people to think about is essentially you bring the trade forward. So you do have that focus on that trade over that short-term period. But once you're in the trade, it goes out and it sits on the horizon with every other trade that you have placed and every other trade that you're going to place going forward. And that's essentially the mental framework that we're looking at. But the challenge is people say to me, well, that's great, Ali, but what do I do in the moment when I know that and I'm going to do that and I know that concept, but what's happening is that I'm thinking too much from either a fear-based mindset or greed-based mindset. So the challenge is when your mindset moves to that extreme, what happens is that perspective narrows and the emotional response goes up, and the chances of breaking your rules, the chances of distorting your perspective about the results of the strategy will happen. So the challenge is, if we just look at some of the results from our guys in our trading room, if you look here, I can pull up a period and you look here, if you're in this little spell here, where you've got the trades in here, the winners, 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 loser, the perspective you would have here would be that the strategy works very well. The short-term perspective, because you've come in, you've had 4 winners at 2 to 1, and then you've had 1 loser, 4 winners, and then 2 losers, and then a load more winners. So your short-term perspective there, from a greed point of view, if you've just seen that and you've started to trade that strategy, your short-term expectation is far more likely to be that that's going to be repeated. And then you end up having 4 losing trades in a row, and suddenly your perspective shifts or your beliefs about that strategy shift. Whereas you could come in at a completely different time. Look, come up here. If you came in and started trading here, this is where you would say potentially that strategy doesn't work. Why? Because you've had 5 losers, 1 winner, and then another 3 losers, albeit that winner was nearly 3.5 times. It would have won back 3.5 times of those losers. So the challenge is, if you are in a fearful space because you've had a run of losers, then your perspective is likely to narrow and your belief is that that strategy potentially doesn't work, or you're more likely to believe that strategy doesn't work. If you hit a period of winners, that becomes your perspective short term. So the idea is, what things can you do to maintain a long-term perspective? Well, firstly, whatever result you're going through, if you're going through a very winning period, is make sure you realize and acknowledge the fact that there will be a period where that result won't continue just through the random distribution. If you're winning 60% of the time, that means 40 trades out of 100 aren't. Sometimes you'll have winner, loser, winner, winner, loser, winner, winner, loser. Other periods of time, you're going to have a group of losing trades come together. So number one, and this is what we're world class at, is regardless of whether it's a swing strategy that I'm trading, one of the 6 that we trade, Kerry's day trades, Martin's day trades, all of them have huge amounts of data, both back tested and real data behind it. So at any time we're experiencing a losing period or a winning period, we can go back to the data, and all of the students can go back to the data, and we'll discuss the results and the comparable data in our live training sessions. And what you'll be able to see is you'll be able to see that perspective. So if you're going through a winning run, you can balance it out from a perspective by realizing that there are going to be periods where it's losing. If you're going through a losing period and you're not necessarily getting the results you want, you can balance that out with seeing that there are periods over a longer term where you're going to be having winning periods. So number one is data. It's hugely important that you have access over time to long periods of data, whether it's one strategy that you can see here, or if I just pull in all of our swing strategies here, you can see, look, we had a bad period through there. You're not going to have winning periods all the time, but then you can see here, look, hugely profitable winning period. So again, this is where traders go, the strategy doesn't work. Their perspective becomes fearful. This is where traders become greedy, because their perspective becomes more greed orientated, because all they've really done for the best part of a couple of months is win. So you have to have the data. So make sure you're working with a trader or a group of traders that have access to data at least 5 times longer than the period that you're going to measure your data over. So for example, that would really simply be, if I'm going to measure my data as a swing trader over a year, I want at least access to 5 years worth of data for the strategies that I'm trading. And that does take time to go and get it yourself, or you can get that from somebody like us, because that's what we do. We will never release a strategy into our groups unless it's got at least 5 times the data for the measurement period that we want. So number one is data. I would say the next thing, really important, is reps. So one of the things that my coach talks to me a lot about is the idea of reps. Is very simply that if you come in and it's your first 2 weeks trading and you've never traded before, and you hit a losing run, let's say you have 3 losers, the risk there is, well, you've only gone through a 3-trade losing run once. There's this misconception that traders that have been trading for 15 years, 20 years like myself, that we've got this magic crystal ball and we're always winning. I'll have 3-trade losing runs. I've just come off the back of a 3-trade losing run on my swing trades. And to counteract, on my position trades, I've just come off a 3-trade winning run. So lose that misconception. Now, again, logically, you can understand that. But if you're putting in the reps, the more times you go through well-managed losing periods and the more times you go through well-managed winning periods, what that does is it helps build up the right mental muscle, as long as you're getting feedback from that. If you continually lose your shit because you keep having a losing run, or you have a couple of losing runs, or you get too big for your boots and start thinking there's something you're doing that's special because you've had a couple of winning runs, all you're doing there is conditioning the wrong behavior. But if you can be around other traders that, when this is happening, maintain a balanced approach, a lot of our guys in our trading room will say the simple fact that you are maintaining a balanced approach regardless of the result and focusing on the data helps them do exactly the same. Which brings me to my last point, which is accountability. So one of the things that will happen over the short term is, for example, if we think about that pendulum of fear and greed that I've just talked about, if you get too greedy or too fearful, you're likely to narrow your perspective and you're likely to think more short term rather than think more long term. Well, the classic example of this will be the trade that we had. We had our oil trade. You probably heard me talk about this, where we banked, well, I banked 12% on that particular trade. You can see the winners there. So in that scenario, when you bank 12%, if you don't have access to the data, if you are not maintaining a balanced approach, if you've not put in the reps where you've done that before, it's very easy for your expectation short term to think that the same thing is going to happen on the next trade. So for example, going into this month, I remember saying to the guys in the trading room, look, just because you've had a 12% return on your 2% investment doesn't mean that the trade next month is going to do the same. So be wary of that short-term expectation to pop in. So the best ways I found to maintain a longer-term perspective, put the reps in, as I've said, get better at it. Secondly, data, make sure that you've got access to the data so you can have a reference point to stay long-term. And then lastly, accountability. Get around the traders that are thinking from a long-term perspective and as a result, acting from a long-term perspective. All right. Hope that was useful. Guys, I'll be back tomorrow with a market review, and I've got a couple of trades that I want to go through as well. So I will be back with you again tomorrow. Look forward to seeing you then. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.